What is up, everyone? It is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. And so today's video is super exciting because today I am going to be talking about how I studied for exams in college and study tips. So first, I'm going to go over some general study tips and advice, and then I'm going to break down 3 different kinds of exams and how I would usually study for them. So the problem set exam, so classes like computer science, economics, math classes, where you have to answer problems, show your work, show your thinking on the exam. The second kind of exam I'm talking about will be the essay exam, where they give you the prompts beforehand. And then the third kind of exam will be the essay, multiple choice, short answer exam, where they're not giving you any kinds of prompts beforehand. So if you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Rachel. I graduated from UC Berkeley in the class of 2020, where I double majored in cognitive science and legal studies. Now, post-grad, I am currently working full-time at a law firm. So if you're a student applying to colleges this cycle looking for essay and application tips, or if you're a current college student looking for college-related advice and study tips, definitely check out Study Hall College Consulting. So without further ado, let's get into this video. And so for all of you new college students, you're probably going to start having midterms coming up so soon, which is exciting but also scary and nerve-wracking, your first college exam. So with that, this video is hopefully going to be helpful, but also just note, these are some study tips that worked for me, but for you all, you definitely have to figure out what works and what does not work for you when you're studying for exams. And also to say, it takes time to figure out what works and what doesn't work. I would say that I didn't hone my study skills until sophomore year of college, so my entire freshman year figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And don't get discouraged after your first exam if it's the lowest score that you've ever received, if it's lower than you were expecting. That just means you have areas to improve upon. See what didn't work the first time you were studying and improve that for the next exam. So first up, we have general study advice. So the first thing is that you want to start early when you're studying. So college, super different from high school. For high school tests, you could probably start studying 1 or 2 days in advance and then score super well on your high school test. But in college, that was not my experience. After I honed my study skills, figured out what started to work, what didn't work for me when studying for tests, I found that I needed to start studying 1 to 2 weeks in advance for my exams. So for me, every start of the semester, I would write down in my agenda planner, note on my calendar when I would have exams coming up. So when I'm flipping through my agenda, then I can easily visualize, okay, which weeks are going to be busier, which weeks are going to be less study focused, and then I'm able to plan my studying in advance. Which my junior year fall semester literally sucked so much. I had 10 weeks of back-to-back exams, 1 or 2 exams every single week. So that was super stressful and super hard to balance doing the readings and homework for classes while also simultaneously studying for the big exams in the class. Another thing, when you're studying, you want to do all of the practice exams and the study guides that the professor is providing, because those study guides, those practice exams that are provided to you, that is basically the professor telling you, okay, these kinds of topics are going to come up. You should definitely know these kinds of problems, questions, themes. I would say always do the materials that the professor is specifically giving you for the exam, because those are going to be very, very useful for you to see what were past exams like. Then the upcoming exam is probably going to follow a similar format. The next general study tip is to go to office hours if you have questions, or rewatch parts of lecture if you were confused or needed some clarifications. And that's why I say start 1 to 2 weeks in advance. Just start reviewing, looking over your notes, things like that, because in those 2 weeks, then you'll be able to figure out, okay, I need to go to office hours to ask the GSI or the professor a question on these topics. I was going over the homework again, still don't know how to do this problem, let me go into office hours. I was doing the practice exam, couldn't figure out something, let me go to office hours. But if you started just a few days before, the weekends before your exam, chances are there might not be any more office hours. Then you wouldn't be able to ask your questions, and those office hours right before the test will be a lot more crowded. Then you may not even get your questions answered because it's going to be more crowded and the professor or GSI has to do more of a group session in office hours rather than individual one-on-one help. And finally, for general advice, you could do timed practice for your exams. So usually midterm exams might be the length of your regular class, so 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Sometimes they might be scheduled for outside of class hours, so in the evening. In that case, it's going to be longer than your regular class session. And then for final exams, those are typically 3 hours at the end of the semester. And so when the professor is giving you the practice exams, you could study with them by sitting down and giving yourself the amount of time your exam will be and doing the practice exam timed. Time yourself and make sure that you're on pace for each of the questions that you need to answer, so you don't run out of time on the real test day. For me, I never really did timed practice. I just knew internally, and the professor GSIs, they usually announce, oh, you have 15 minutes left, you have 1 hour left at the front of the classroom, so you can gauge time that way. And just knowing the feel of the exam, if you have 5 questions to answer in 1 hour, then you know you cannot spend 30 minutes on one question and then do 4 questions in the other 30 minutes. But being able to work efficiently and not get stuck on one question, essay, or multiple choice that eats up all of your time, but circle it, note it down, and then move on, and then come back to it at the end. So being flexible and realizing that the time is finite at the end of the exam period, you don't get that extra time, so you do need to work smoothly and efficiently through all the questions and not get stuck on one question. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about study group advice. So I think that studying in groups, whether you have friends from class, friends from your dorm that is in the same class, can be helpful, but there are some caveats with group studying that you should be wary of. So in your group studying, you really want to find partners to study with that are good students, knowledgeable in the subject, but most importantly, you should set the rules in your study group. Hey, we're going to meet up at the library at this time on the weekend. We should all be familiar with the subject. We should all have our notes and everything prepared, rather than going to that study session and nobody has studied at all yet and everyone is just like, oh, I don't know how to do anything. So I found it the most helpful when I had study groups where all of us had studied individually on our own before our study group meeting, and then we went to the study group with maybe questions that we had, problems that we couldn't figure out. Then we could work together as a group to figure out that question or problem, rather than everyone going in not knowing anything and using that study group time to read the textbook or something. Personally, I found that when your study group is going into the study session not having the materials prepared, it is a big waste of time. This study session is not a tutoring session where the one person who studied alone will come and tutor the rest of the group that didn't study yet, but this is going to be a collaborative process. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the problem problem set exams. So for exams where you might have to show your work, answer problems like math, economics, computer science, those kinds of classes. So with these problem set exams, like I said in the general study advice section, you should definitely be doing the study guides and the practice exams that the professor is giving you. So for me in these types of classes, I would print out the study guide, the practice exams, so I can have them on pieces of paper, simulate test day in that regard, so I can practice, oh, I have half a page to do this problem, so on test day you aren't running out of room, you aren't unfamiliar with the testing papers. So before I even study using the practice exams that they provide, I first start by going over all of my notes and redoing all of the problems that we had to do for homework, for any quizzes in the class, things like that. And this is why studying takes a long time, but literally every single homework problem I would do again, make sure I know how to do the homework problems, because the homework, even though they're a little bit easier than the actual exam on test day, the homework problems do provide a good basis of the knowledge that you need for test day. And then if it's like a math class with a textbook, then in the textbook I would go over the bonus questions that they have, the questions that are more difficult at the end of each chapter, and then I would also just pick random questions to do as practice in each chapter that's going to be tested on. So that's basically drilling all of the material, drilling all of the different kinds of questions, going through each chapter, redoing the homework. It really refreshes all of the formulas, questions, problems that you need to know for test day. And then I'll start doing the actual practice exams. So on these practice exams, if there's 5 questions, if there's 8 questions, you really need to know how to do all of these kinds of questions, because chances are on test day, a similar kind of question will show up on your real exam. So you don't want to just learn, 5 out of the 8 kinds of questions that you see on the practice exam and just hope and pray that those other 3 that you have no idea how to do don't show up on your exam, but you want to learn all the different kinds. Like I said, go to office hours and ask questions if you aren't sure how to do some kind of problem. And with that also, these practice exams, even if they were given in other semesters, there can be other topics that wasn't tested for the last semester's exam for this subject, but it's going to come up on your exam. So that's why I say doing the homework is important, because that will help to catch some of the topics that weren't maybe previously tested on, but are going to be tested on this semester. So that's a little bit about how I study for these practice kinds of exams. It's literally just drilling a bunch of problems, because on the test day, it's not going to be as easy as the homework, but on the test day, they're going to give you tricky, different, new kinds of problems to see if you can extrapolate from the knowledge that they taught you in class to figure out a new kind of problem that is similar to the topics you were taught, but a little bit different. So can you think outside the box? Do you have the fundamentals down so well that you are able to do new problems that you have never seen before? So speaking of the actual exam on test day, this is from when I took Math 16B. So you can see on the screen, it shows the different questions and everything like that. A big tip for these problem exams is that you want to make your answers easy to see, because you're probably scribbling, writing down a lot of things. You also want to have good handwriting, because if the GSI grading it can't figure out what you're trying to say, you're not going to get points for it. So you want your handwriting to be legible, and you want your final answers to be as easy as possible to locate. So you can see here, I am squaring all of my answers so that when the GSI is quickly looking and grading each question, they can easily find my answer, and I know I'm going to get points. Similar to that, you always want to show your work on these kinds of exams, and if you don't necessarily know how to answer the question fully, go as far as you think and and just keep writing things down because you can get partial credit. So if you don't know a question, you don't want to just leave it blank like, oh, I don't know it, let me just skip it and never answer it. That is bad because you can see on the right hand side with the question scoring, you can get 3 points for almost no correct work. You want to be showing your work so you can hopefully get partial credit with your answers, even if maybe your final answer isn't correct. So the next kind of exam that comes up a lot in like my legal studies classes, political science courses, would be the essay kind of exam where they do give you the prompts beforehand. So this could be a test where the professor, they give you 5 prompts and then they're saying, okay, on the exam, we are going to pick 2 of these prompts and you will have to write a normal, long essay about it. So with these kinds of exams, they are basically giving you all of the questions beforehand, but it is random. You do not know what the final questions for the essays will be on test day. But for me, on these kinds of exams, I would go through and basically outline 5 different essays. So I would take each essay prompt, stick it on a different Word document, think of a thesis statement for that essay, what my body paragraphs are going to be, and then within those body paragraphs, looking at all of my notes, what we went over so far in class, and figuring out what kinds of examples, textual support can I use from what we learned in class, and then write about it in my essay. I would think of like a quick introduction, a quick conclusion, and then basically memorize the entire thing for all 5 essays. I've had some people in these classes, they would literally write 5 full-length, numerous page essays and then memorize those word for word, line by line. Personally, I think that is a little bit overboard and very, very time consuming. I would just make my outlines for each essays and then memorize my outline. So for whichever question that came up on the exam, then I would know, oh yeah, I remember I wanted to talk about XYZ, and then just knowing generally what I want to write about, knowing generally how I'm going to use that example case study to help prove my point and to help prove my thesis. So when memorizing, this is from a quiz from Linguistics 100, so not an essay-based class, but basically when memorizing, I would just drill and write down the things that I wanted to remember over and over and over again. So when it was test day, I wasn't stumped or confused about the outline or the things that I needed to remember for the test, but I could write down whichever essay prompt came up, I could write down my outline for that in 30 seconds or 1 minute, because in these timed exams, you don't really have time to dilly-dally and get stuck on the outline that you were supposed to have memorized, so that I didn't have to continuously think of the points that I wanted to make, but I had it written down on my green book, blue book at the start of the exam when they said go, so that for the rest of the test, I could just refer back to what I had written down. So same thing for this linguistics quiz. I just wrote down all of these notes at the bottom of the screen here. So during the quiz, I really didn't have to think too much, but all I had to do was refer back to the notes that I had memorized and written down. And so finally, for the multiple choice exams, the exams where you just have to write essays or short answers, they're not giving you the prompts beforehand, I feel like for these kinds of exams, it's a lot of going through your notes and learning and memorizing and knowing all of the information that was talked about. So for this, I have another video about how I took notes in college that I will have linked down below. So before the exam, 1 to 2 weeks out, I would take the notes that I had written down in my notebooks and then type them up in a Word document while also typing up any of the lecture slides, re-listening to different parts of lecture, and adding those to my notes. I felt that writing the notes in class with pen and paper was very, very helpful rather than typing the notes initially. And then before the exams, I would take these handwritten notes and type them them up so then I can print them out and read them on the go, and they're just easier to read when they're like not in your handwriting. And I felt the process of handwriting to then typing them up after the fact was very, very helpful. It got me to remember the information that we talked about in class, and when you're like going through your notes and then typing up all of the information again, it helps to remind you of the stuff you talked about, refresh your memory. And then for those multiple choice exams, short answer essays, it is really about, if you see a question, can you remember and can you give the answer? So then going through my notes, remembering the big topic, memorizing different points, and then making up practice questions. This kind of exam bodes well with group studying, same with the essay kind of exam. So in the group, you could go in and make up practice questions to quiz each other. So everyone could come in and you ask each other fake questions and then you all have to answer them, or you make up fake short answer essay questions and then you all have to answer them on the spot. So yeah, those are some of my tips on how I studied for exams at college, specifically UC Berkeley. So definitely let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions or if you have any video ideas that you want to see me do. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Definitely give this video a big thumbs up to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. Thank you so much again. Good luck on all of your upcoming exams, and I will see you all next time.